Good evening and welcome to WION. I'm Palki Sharma Upadhyay. Let's get started.
Gravitas, co-presented by
SBI Mutual Fund, a partner for life.
Chemistry That Matters, SABIC. Co-powered by Star Health Insurance, the health insurance specialist. Driven by Kia Sonet, wild by design.
I'm not here to call out his lies. Everybody knows he's a liar.
But you
I just want to make sure.
Joe, you're the liar.
I want to make sure.
Graduated last in your class, not first in your class.
I want to make sure.
Mr. President, can you let him finish, sir?
No, he doesn't know how to do that.
Protect
Mr.
people
President,
with
I'm the
pre-existing
moderator of this
conditions.
debate, and I would like you to let me ask my question, and then you can answer.
Go ahead. This is
Evidence
not
of
going to
that.
end well.
Far too often, we have lamented on the falling standards of discourse on Indian television. Guess what? The Americans are giving India a run for their money. At the forefront are presidential candidates dishing out expletives, calling each other names and slinging mud. We saw the first presidential debate today, full of unparliamentary language and behavior. Donald Trump and Joe Biden refused to stick to the subject. It was a 90-minute-long war of words. Who won? Do these debates affect voter preferences? What was Donald Trump's strategy? We'll be joined by Trump's former communications director, Anthony Scaramucci, to talk about this. Also, reports of a new scandal in this election. Is voting fraud underway? We'll discuss. Also on the show tonight, India has tested another BrahMos missile today. As the stalemate on the border continues, India firms up its defenses against China. A major verdict triggers a national debate. A court acquits all 32 accused in the Babri Mosque demolition case. Who razed the mosque then? Another gang rape and death shocks India. The police allegedly forced the victim's family to cremate her body in the dead of the night. And Israel passes a controversial but perhaps much-needed law banning mass protests in the middle of a pandemic. We'll discuss, but first, as always, Gravitas Global Headlines.
As the conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan over the disputed region of Nagorno-Karabakh intensifies, the two sides have brushed off the suggestion to hold peace talks. Meanwhile, French President Emmanuel Macron has slammed Turkey's stand over backing Azerbaijan. Macron has called the remarks made by Turkey reckless and dangerous. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo arrived in Rome today amid a rift with the Vatican over relations with China. Mike Pompeo urged the Vatican to join the U.S. in denouncing violations of religious freedom in China. The Vatican has defended its pursuit of an extended agreement with China on bishop nominations. German Chancellor Angela Merkel has said that she would hold talks with Belarus's main opposition leader, Svetlana, days after French President Emmanuel Macron met with her and pledged to help mediate in the country's crisis. Merkel holds the rotating presidency of the European Union. She said Germany did not recognize Alexander Lukashenko as the winner of the presidential election. The World Bank is seeking a board approval for a $12 billion COVID-19 vaccine financing plan to help poor and developing countries secure a sufficient share of vaccine doses when they become available in the coming months. Meanwhile, an advocacy group for sharks has warned that at least 500,000 sharks around the world could be killed in the process of developing a COVID-19 vaccine. An ingredient found in the livers of sharks is intrinsic to producing a quick and effective immune response. The Japanese Defense Ministry has made a request for a record-high $52 billion military budget to assure military preparedness amid increasing pressure from China and North Korea. The Defense Ministry has said that this would help Japan build its capacity to respond to new threats, including cyber, space, and electromagnetic warfare. Former Pakistan Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif addressed his party colleagues in a virtual meeting today. The leader said the arrest of his brother Shahbaz Sharif has saddened him. However, the government's actions have strengthened the resolve of his party to intensify their struggle. The president of opposition party PMLN, Shahbaz Sharif, was earlier arrested in a money laundering case. The International Space Station is leaking air above normal volumes, but NASA says the leak presents no danger to the Russian-American crew, and the issue would be resolved in the coming days. Tens of thousands of Californians fled their homes in the Napa and Sonoma wine regions as a new blaze in the north of the state killed 3 people. Some of Napa Valley's best-known vineyards have been consumed by an out-of-control blaze that raced through more than 35,000 acres. 3-time champion Serena Williams has pulled out of the French Open. The 6th seed was due to face fellow mom Svetlana Pironkova in the second round, but decided to forfeit the match. The 23-time Grand Slam singles champion came into the tournament carrying an Achilles tendon injury that had bothered her during her semi-final defeat at the US Open against Victoria Azarenka. She did beat fellow American Christy Ahn in the first round on Monday, but the injury has flared up again. The 39-year-old American has suggested that she will not play again this season. Tottenham Hotspur reached the quarter-finals of the EFL Cup after edging past Chelsea in a penalty shootout. Frank Lampard's side dominated the first half and led through Timo Werner's 19th-minute strike, but Spurs responded well after the break and got a deserved equalizer from Eric Lamela in the 83rd minute. With the scores level at 1-1 after 90 minutes, the match went to a shootout. Each of the first 9 kicks were scored, but Chelsea's Mason Mount clipped the post and missed with the 10th effort to hand Spurs a 5-4 victory.
Liar, clown, racist, stupid, fascist, xenophobic. These are not random words. If you woke up early this morning to tune into the first presidential debate, like our team did, these insults is all that you would have picked up. Because this was not a debate, it was a verbal brawl. There were high expectations from the first debate. It was the first time that the two candidates, Donald Trump and Joe Biden, were facing each other. There was a list of topics to be discussed, but that did not happen. There were chaotic interruptions, personal insults were hurled. In the end, the 90-minute-long debate was just a slugfest. Who won? What does this mean for this election? That's what we'll discuss tonight on the show. The venue was the Samson Pavilion in Ohio. Perhaps for the first time, we're witnessing a socially distanced debate. There were no handshakes, no crowds. The podiums for the candidates were kept at a distance, but that did not stop them from going after each other. As of today, Donald Trump is behind Joe Biden, at least in the opinion polls, which tend to go horribly wrong. Many pundits had suggested that Trump will have to do something in this debate to steal these votes away from Joe Biden. So the American president came out swinging. His strategy was clear. He wanted to appear dominating. He wanted to make Biden look weak. And he resorted to what he knows best. He bulldozed Joe Biden and the moderator with constant interruptions and accusations. Donald Trump, known for his unconventional, bombastic and insulting tweets, showed the same social media persona. It was live in action during the first presidential debate, and when a finger was pointed at the president, he did his best to deflect. He defended his response to the Wuhan virus pandemic by saying that Biden did not do enough to contain swine flu. When asked about his tax returns, Donald Trump said that he had paid millions of dollars in taxes. Just before this debate, remember, a report had said that the US president paid just $750 in 2017 as income tax. Instead of addressing this, Trump constantly attacked Biden over his son Hunter Biden's dealings. Look at this.
Here's the deal. The fact is that everything he's saying so far is simply a lie. I'm not here to call out his lies. Everybody knows he's a liar.
But you
I just want to make sure.
Joe, you're the liar.
I want to make sure.
Graduated last in your class, not first in your class.
God, I know how to do the job. I know how to get the job
Well, you
done.
didn't do very well in swine flu. H1N1, you were a disaster. Your own chief of staff said you were a disaster.
14,000. My son was in Iraq. He spent a year there. He got the Bronze Star. He got the Conspicuous Service Medal. He was not a loser. He was a patriot, and the people left behind there were heroes.
Really?
And I resent.
Are you talking
like
about Hunter?
hell.
Are you talking about
I'm
Hunter?
talking about my son, Beau Biden. You're talking about.
I don't know, Beau. I know Hunter.
Yeah,
Hunter
you know
got
Beau.
Hunter got thrown out of the military. He was thrown out, dishonorably discharged.
That's not true. He
For
wasn't dishonorably.
cocaine use.
Were you able to make some sense of that? A lot of people who watched said they felt dizzy after the debate. According to a report, Trump interrupted Biden a total of 73 times. 73 times in 90 minutes. He repeatedly heckled Biden because he wanted to throw him off balance. On some occasions, Trump was successful. Biden lost his cool and traded insults. He called the American president a clown. At one point, Joe Biden even told Donald Trump to shut up. You have to see it to believe it.
I'm not going to answer the question
Why
because,
wouldn't you answer that
because
question?
the question is the question
Supreme Court
is
Justice,
the
radical
question,
left.
Will you shut up, man?
Listen, who is on your list, Joe?
This
Who's
is
on your
so
list?
Gentlemen, I think we've
is
ended
so
this.
He's going to pack the court.
We have
We're not going to give a list.
We have ended.
I did my job and I did it very well.
Oh,
I
really?
did it
I'd like
honorably.
to know who they are.
Well, I'll give you the list of the
fire
people who
them.
testified.
No, go ahead, sir.
Sure, you've already fired most of them because they did a good job.
Some people don't do a good job. With you,
Go ahead. Wait a minute. You get the final word, Mr.
Well, it's hard to get any word in with this clown. Excuse me.
Hey, let me just say, Joe.
The fact is that everything he's saying so far is simply a lie. I'm not here to call out his lies. Everybody knows he's a liar.
But you
I just
agree.
want to make sure.
Joe, you're the liar.
I want to make sure.
Graduated last in your class, not first in your class.
God, I want to make
Mr.
sure.
President, can you let him finish, sir?
That last voice was of Chris Wallace, the Fox News anchor who had the most difficult job in the world, you could say, moderating this debate. On the eve of the debate, Wallace had declared that his job is to be, quote-unquote, as invisible as possible. To that extent, he was quite successful. Wallace was invisible, but not in a way that he would have imagined. Wallace is known for his sharp interrogation of political figures, but this time he struggled to control the debate, not for want of trying, though.
You shut up, man.
Listen, who is on your list, Joe?
This
Who's
is
on your
so
list?
Gentlemen, I think
This
we've
is
ended
so
this.
He's going to pack the court.
We have
We're not going to give a list.
We have ended this segment. We're going to move on to the second segment.
That was really a productive segment, wasn't it? Keep yapping, man.
The people.
Gentlemen, I hate to raise my voice, but I see it seems to be, why should I be different than the two of you?
I want to make sure.
Graduated last in your class, not first in your class.
God, I want to make
Mr.
sure.
President, can you let him finish, sir?
No, he doesn't know how to do that.
Rid of the individual mandate.
I'm going to give you an opportunity.
I got rid of the individual mandate, which was a big chunk of
comprehensive plan.
That is absolutely a big thing. That was the worst part of Obamacare.
Sir,
Chris, that was the worst part of Obama.
Let me ask my question.
Well, I'll ask Joe. The individual mandate was the most unpopular aspect of Obamacare. I got rid of it.
I'd like you
and
to,
we will protect
Mr.
people
President,
with
I'm the moderator of this
conditions.
debate, and I would like you to let me ask my question, and then you can answer.
Go ahead.
Question.
Quite a dramatic debate. There's no stopping the reactions. The world of social media that remains split over this election seems to agree on one thing, that this debate was an unmitigated disaster. One Twitter user suggested that there should be a mute button for the candidate's microphone. Another compared the debate to a wrestling match. Social media is united in its criticism. Politicians remain divided as ever. Democratic vice presidential nominee Kamala Harris criticized Donald Trump's conduct. No surprises there. She said that Trump has denigrated the office of the president. No major reactions from the Republican side yet. Trump perhaps has spoken for everyone there. What about the rest of the world? Well, they're not holding back any punches. Take a look at this.
1% of the ballots for 2016 were invalidated.
He has no idea what he's talking about. Here's the deal.
Understand Wow, it was hard to hear what was being said. It was hard to watch that shouting match for 90 minutes.
Tens of thousands of ballots being manipulated. I can't go along with that. This is not going to end well.
He cannot stop you from being able to determine the outcome of this election.
Poison duel. In the battle for the White House, Donald Trump and challenger Joe Biden fight a heated and partly chaotic duel.
It's going to be a fair election. If it's a fair election, I am 100% on board.
No one has established at all that there is fraud related to mail-in ballots.
It was the first round of debates between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. They were expected to discuss topical political issues.
Tens of thousands of ballots being manipulated. I can't go along with that.
The fact is, I will accept it, and he will too. You know why?
It's an estimated nearly 100 million Americans were going to tune in, and a large chunk would have tuned out. The only winners, if you could call it that, were President Xi and President Putin.
This guy,
I want to see an honest ballot count.
Gentlemen, you say that's the end of it? This is the end of this debate?
Honest ballot count.
So we come back to the question, who won? How did Donald Trump fare? What difference, if any, do debates like these make? And who better to understand this than someone who has worked very closely with Donald Trump, former White House Communications Director Anthony Scaramucci. I spoke to him earlier today. Anthony Scaramucci, welcome to WION.
Hey, nice to be here. Thank you.
You've served as the White House Communications Director, and you'd understand his strategy. Was the idea to just make sure that Biden doesn't get to say what he wants to say?
Well, I think it was a twofold strategy. Interrupt the vice president as much as possible and then try to express some level of delegitimization of our electoral process. He spent the last 5 minutes of the debate basically telling lies to the American people about the electoral process. We don't have a lot of voter fraud as it relates to mail-in ballots, but he was trying to suggest that. And I think that's another strategy to either suppress the vote or to cause confusion about the accuracy of the outcome of that vote.
According to a report, 90% of the voters in America have already made up their mind on who they're going to vote for. Can these debates really influence those who've decided?
Well, last night's debate certainly is not going to move the needle, in my opinion. You are right. It is about 90% according to multiple polling sources. And just to contrast that with 2016, there was about 20% of the vote that was undecided at this time 4 years ago. But this is very different. You have a president in office. You have a record to look at. But you also have a situation where the president has been very polarizing. He has not expanded the tent of his base. And the great irony here is he is the Secretary Clinton of this race, meaning he is the more polarizing of the two candidates. But last night's debate, I think, was a stalemate, primarily because of what the president was doing. His grandstanding and his interrupting, I think, caused that debate to stall. And I think it was very frustrating for the people watching in terms of trying to evaluate the plans of the two candidates. Clearly, the president doesn't have a plan. Otherwise, he would have spent time on it last night.
Donald Trump evokes sharp responses. People either agree with him or do not agree with him, but there's never a dull moment when President Trump speaks. Would you say that communication is one of his strong suits?
Well, listen, there's no question about that. He's an entertainer, a reality television host, and he is when you're looking at President Trump, you're waiting for that verbal car crash. And so there's an expression in America called rubbernecking. As cars slow down to look at other cars, the president's always about to verbally car crash, which causes everybody to pay attention to what he's saying. Even if the idioms that he's using are elementary school idioms or middle school idioms, he is an effective communicator, no question about that. But remember, people do not remember what you're saying, but they do remember how you make them feel. And I think last night was a disaster for the president. I think he made people feel that he had very little respect for them or the civility of the process.
As of today, Donald Trump is behind in most opinion polls, but we've seen opinion polls go horribly wrong, including what we saw in 2016. Which way do you think the wind is blowing this time?
Well, remember, those opinion polls in 2016 were not that wrong. I mean, he lost the popular vote by 3.5%. He won the Electoral College by about 78,000 votes in 3 states. So it was inside the margin of error. I think it's going to be very difficult for him to achieve those types of results again.
And those who track elections like to talk about vote share and so on, but what matters at the end of the day is who gets the office. And Donald Trump won in 2016. We'll have to see what happens this time. In July, you said that you want to see Trump get humiliated in this election.
Yeah.
Do you think Joe Biden is the man to secure a convincing win?
Well, I do believe that. But remember, this is going to be a referendum against President Trump. I mean, so this will be a repudiation of his words and his actions, the bellicosity of his rhetoric, the bullying, the misdirection, the mismanagement of the crisis, the COVID-19 crisis, and the decisions that he's made that has pushed the American economy effectively into a recession that's the steepest recession since the Great Depression. So this will be a repudiation, and I predict a humiliation. And Joe Biden will win. Will that margin be super wide? I don't know, but I think it's going to be wider than people think. This is very similar to the Carter-Reagan election in reverse. It'll look tight till the end, and then, of course, in the end, it broke for Mr. Reagan, and he won the presidency, and the incumbent was repudiated, and I think that's going to happen here.
Are you suggesting that Joe Biden is incidental and that if he wins, and you're saying he will win, he'll win not because he's Joe Biden, but because he's not Donald Trump?
Yes, I think that's true. I think if you look at the modern era of the electoral process of repudiating a incumbent, it's always a referendum about the incumbent. It was a vote against Jimmy Carter. It was a vote against George Herbert Walker Bush in 1992. And I think this will be a vote against Ronald Reagan. Joe Biden is competent. The vice president is competent. He has a record to run on of competence and centrism. But I don't think he needs to do much more than he's doing right now. This is a self-implosion taking place by President Trump.
Anthony Scaramucci, thanks very much for being with us on Beyond.
Good questions. Thank you. Have a great night.
Elections are synonymous with controversies, and a presidential debate is no reason not to have a new one. This is about absentee ballots, the votes being sent via post. Trump keeps complaining about them, and now he has ammo to raise more doubts over the entire process. Nearly 100,000 voters in New York have got defective absentee ballots. What went wrong? Apparently, the envelope that came with the ballot had the wrong voter information. These envelopes are supposed to be used by voters to send in their votes. The problem is mostly limited to Brooklyn. Authorities say that voters here will now receive new ballots. President Trump did not waste time, though, to turn this lapse into a major issue. He fired 5 tweets, one after the other. And he said that there will be widespread fraud in this election because millions of voters have the choice to mail in their votes. The United States is the worst affected country in this Wuhan virus pandemic. In an attempt to keep voters safe, election authorities have introduced mail-in voting. So voters have 2 options, basically. They can choose to get their ballot at home and mail in their vote, or they can drop it at a dedicated election drop box. Trump says the entire process is vulnerable to fraud. Postal and election authorities do not agree with the president. So what happened in New York? Is this a serious case of fraud? According to reports, the ballots themselves had no error, just the envelopes. They are supposed to be used to send back the votes, these envelopes, and they had wrong names and addresses. And this does cast a doubt over New York's ability to conduct an election during a pandemic where millions are expected to mail in their vote. So the president does not agree with the process, and he refuses to commit to a peaceful transition if he loses the election.
Will you urge your supporters to stay calm during this extended period, not to engage in any civil unrest? And will you pledge tonight that you will not declare victory until the election has been independently certified?
I hope it's going to be a fair election. If it's a fair election, I am 100% on board. But if I see tens of thousands of ballots being manipulated, I can't go along with that.
Questions are being raised against the New York City Board of Elections also, the authority that is managing the election in New York. This board is run by both Democrats and Republicans, and it has a patchy track record. Back in the month of June, the primaries in New York ran into problems too. What about the rest of America? Are people struggling to vote? It doesn't seem like it. Early voting has already begun. Reports say more than 1 million Americans have already cast their vote. And this was well before the first debate. About 800,000 ballots came from the most competitive states like Wisconsin, North Carolina, Minnesota and Georgia. In 36 states, more than 30 million voters have requested for a ballot, which is not a very big number. As of 2019, there were almost 200 million eligible voters in America. The election is still 33 days away. Watch this space. For more than 140 days now, China has been promising a de-escalation at the border. But it doesn't walk the talk. Now, Beijing has come up with a new logic, a new plan to justify its military assertiveness. China says it is following the LAC, line of actual control, proposed way back in 1959. A position that India has rejected for more than 60 years now. Why bring it up now? China is not willing to relent. What should New Delhi do? Strengthen its defences, and that's what it's doing, rolling out missiles to counter the Chinese threat. Today, India tested the BrahMos missile. 2 more missiles have been deployed. This report has all the details.
The city of Balasore in India's Odisha was buzzing today. A supersonic cruise missile roared through the skies, travelling nearly 3 times faster than the speed of sound. The missile on your screen is the BrahMos. It has been in India's arsenal for a while. Now the scientists at India's Defence Research and Development Organisation, or DRDO, have extended its range. The missile can now travel up to 400 kilometers. It has the potential to hit targets deep inside enemy lines. The BrahMos is part of a lineup of 3 missiles that would serve as deterrents against China. As the border standoff continues, India is now positioning these missiles close to counter the Chinese build-up. The BrahMos, along with the Nirbhay and Akash, are guarding India on the front. The Nirbhay has a range of 800 kilometers, while the Akash, which is a surface-to-air missile, can hit targets that are 40 kilometers away. These missiles have very specific roles to play in case China decides to escalate the situation. Reports say the BrahMos can be used to target Chinese airstrips in Tibet and Xinjiang. It can also be used to take out a warship in the Indian Ocean. The Nirbhay is a long-range all-weather missile. It can be launched from multiple platforms, and it can carry conventional and nuclear warheads. The Akash can be used to counter any PLA aircraft intrusion across the line of actual control in Ladakh. Boosting India's defences against China is the need of the hour, because China isn't pulling back its troops. PLA soldiers are stationed close to the LAC. India has been expanding its border infrastructure to track their movements, a move that hasn't gone unnoticed in Beijing.
We are also opposed to infrastructure construction aimed at military acquisition and control in the disputed border areas. According to the recent consensus reached between China and India, neither side should take any action in the border area that will complicate the situation, so as to avoid affecting the efforts of both sides to ease the situation.
The Chinese aggression is an attempt to change the status quo on the ground. Recently, Beijing said that it is abiding by the line of control proposed 61 years ago in 1959. This was proposed by Chinese Premier Zhou Enlai to India's then Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru in a letter. The Chinese proposal was instantly rejected by India. Zhao wanted forces on both sides to withdraw 20 kilometers from the McMahon Line in the east. For the first time in this standoff, China has made its position on the border clear. It wants India to accept the proposal made in 1959. India has responded with yet another rejection. A statement from New Delhi called China's claims unilateral. Considering Beijing's hardline, it seems like the PLA has dug in for the long haul. India is responding by matching the PLA's troops and resources toe-to-toe. The latest missile deployments will serve as deterrents against China's military adventurism. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Now let's talk about martyrs. They're the stuff of legends in most countries, people who have sacrificed their lives for the national cause. How a country remembers its martyrs is a hallmark of its society and polity. Some countries observe national holidays. Others have monuments dedicated to martyrs. Today was China's National Day for Martyrs. Let's tell you a bit about how this day came to be. China's Martyrs' Day is an exercise in patriotism. It was first observed in 2014 to commemorate Chinese martyrs, mostly from the war against Japan. The idea is to place communist fighters at the center of China's battles against foreign powers. Martyrs who did not belong to the Communist Party were quickly forgotten. As always, President Xi Jinping led the tributes at Tiananmen Square. Senior communist leaders and members of the Politburo were in attendance today. There were floral tributes for the fallen heroes and a military parade overseen by the president himself. It all seemed very formal, very patriotic. But let's put the Chinese Communist Party's patriotism to test. And for that, we do not have to go back 80 years to the Sino-Japanese War. Let's instead talk about what happened in mid-June 2020, this year. Deadly clashes broke out in the Galwan Valley in Ladakh. The Indian Army was quick to confirm casualties. As many as 20 soldiers were killed by Chinese troops. Their names will soon be inscribed at the National War Memorial in New Delhi. Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, paid floral tributes to them in Leh. What about China? It's been 77 days since the clashes in Galwan. There's been no word on Chinese casualties. The Indian Army, even the Chinese state media, admitted that China lost soldiers in the clash. American intelligence reports indicate the very same thing. They say as many as 35 Chinese soldiers may have been killed. The number may be debatable, but this fact is not. China is yet to admit casualties and recognize the sacrifice of its soldiers. Why is Beijing doing this? Because reports of troop casualty do not fit well with China's global ambitions. Its bid to project the PLA, the People's Liberation Army, as an invincible fighting force. Soldiers are expendable in China's mission for global domination. But by ignoring Chinese martyrs in Galwan and honoring those from almost a century back, China has made one thing very clear. Martyrs' Day is less about remembering fallen heroes. It is more about shaping the legacy around the Communist Party of China. Let's come to India. In India, we are reminded time and again how our legal justice system is failing, how the wait for justice is never ending, how the courts have failed the country's women, and how these reasons are cited time and again to justify taking matters into one's own hands. There are two stories from India that I want to share with you tonight, both less than 24 hours old, and both restore India's faith in the erosion of the judicial system. The first story is about a verdict in the Babri demolition case. As the name suggests, it involves the demolition of the Babri Masjid or the Babri Mosque. It happened in Ayodhya in the year 1992. 28 years later, a court in India has acquitted all the accused. So who demolished the mosque? Anti-social elements, according to the court, and this is a CBI court. or a court set up by the Central Bureau of Investigation. There are 32 surviving accused in the case. All of them have been acquitted today. The court said the demolition of the mosque was not planned and that it involved, quote-unquote, anti-social elements. A special judge said, and I quote again, the accused tried to stop the demolition. Who were these accused? Senior BJP leaders L.K. Advani, Murli Manohar Joshi and Uma Bharti, among others. What are they accused of? What were rather they accused of? Criminal conspiracy, promoting enmity and inciting activists with incendiary speeches raised from a dais next to the mosque. The 16th century mosque was raised on the 6th of December 1992. The perpetrators believe that the mosque was built on the ruins of an ancient temple, one that marked the birthplace of Lord Ram in Ayodhya. Why did they not take this matter to court then? Perhaps they did not believe in India's justice system or did not want to wait a decade or a couple of decades for a verdict. So the mob took matters into their own hands and tore down the mosque. The demolition was preceded by Rath Yatras or chariot processions and fiery speeches. What followed led to the death of nearly 3,000 people. Riots broke out in several parts of India. The episode changed the Indian political scenario forever. It split the people and political parties of India into three groups. One that said the demolition of the mosque was a good thing. The second that promised to bring the perpetrators to justice. And the third, those who sat on the fence. Today, all three sides have lost, as has the Indian legal justice system. Because 28 years, 351 witnesses, 600 documents and multiple twists in this case later, it has been decided that no one raised the mosque. It is a commentary on India's systems, and it gets worse. This CBI court verdict comes after India's apex court called the mosque's demolition unlawful, quote unquote, a criminal act. This happened in November 2019. The Supreme Court of India was delivering its verdict on the Ram Janmabhoomi case. The court said, and I quote, "It is necessary to provide restitution to the Muslim community for the unlawful destruction of their place of worship." Like I said, it was in November last year, just 10 months ago. The Ram temple issue has been settled by the highest court of the country, and that decision must be accepted by India. But to hold nobody accountable for the destruction of a mosque sends a very troubling message. Now for the second story, another gang rape, another death, and once again, cruel apathy of the system. It's a deja vu moment for India. A rape victim was cremated in the wee hours of the day, allegedly against the wishes of her family. Why? To answer that, I will have to go back to the 14th of September. That's when the horror story begins. On the 14th of September this year, a 19-year-old girl was gang raped in the Indian state of Uttar Pradesh at a place called Hathras. The victim was abducted from a field and gang raped. She was found lying in a pool of blood, paralyzed and with injuries in her neck and spine. 2 days ago, she was moved to a hospital in New Delhi. She died there while undergoing treatment. Her body was brought to Hathras last night. And in the dead of the night, she was cremated. Her family says they were forced to cremate her. Can the police force a cremation? Why did they do it? These are questions that the UP police has not answered. But these questions will not die down because these images from the cremation have gone viral. Everyone from the country's Prime Minister to celebrities to women's rights groups have demanded justice for the victim. The case gets murkier when you consider another factor. This girl was a Dalit. Activists say that this is the reason the police were not prompt in their response to the case. Her family says that the main accused has a history of harassing Dalits in the area. He belongs to the upper caste, as do the other accused. All 4 of these men have been arrested. We've always said that a crime is a crime and should not be seen through filters of caste and religion, but where there is enough to suggest these factors played a role, it would be wrong to not mention them. The brutality in Hathras is a blot on India. It comes 8 years after the Nirbhaya case, or what is also referred to as the 2012 Delhi gang rape case. That winter, India lit candles, marched in solidarity, chanted never again. But this country could not keep its word to its daughters. 8 years on, look where we are. The Nirbhaya case was supposed to be a wake-up call for India. Rape laws were toughened. The Nirbhaya Fund was set up to ensure women's safety and security. What happened then? Why was the 19-year-old from Hathras not safe at her workplace? She was gang raped while she was working on the field with her family. Our system has failed on so many fronts. Reports say 63% of the Nirbhaya Fund allocated to states has not been used. As for the strict rape laws that we have, here's what the Supreme Court of India admitted last year. Let me quote. Post-Nirbhaya, which shocked the conscience of the nation, many amendments were introduced in criminal law, redefining the ambit of offences, providing for effective and speedy investigation and trial. Still, the statistics would reveal that desired results could not be achieved. What are the statistics? Let me read some out for you. Last year, India saw more than 4 lakh cases of crime against women. Let that sink in. 4 lakh in 1 year. There were 87 cases of rape recorded every day. And these are just the registered cases. 87 every day. Rapes. In 2018, India recorded 33,356 cases of rape. In 2017, the number was 32,559. These numbers are from the NCRB, the National Crime Records Bureau. What happened to these women? Did they get justice? How long did they have to wait? Nirbhaya's family had to wait for 8 years to get justice. And this case was apparently fast-tracked. 8 years. When it comes to crime against women, India's slow legal processes fail to act as a deterrent. It has created agitation, anxiety, and unrest in people. The result is this. In India, people are citing the slow judicial process to justify taking law in their own hands. What happened in Hyderabad last year makes for a classic example. One woman was gang raped, brutalized and murdered in Hyderabad last year. Police picked up the 4 accused. All 4 of them were killed in a police encounter even before a trial could begin. And India cheered this. For many, it was justice served. Now, in the case of the Hathras victim, authorities are promising a fast-track trial, which, going by their record, does not inspire confidence. This is cliched, but it's true. Justice delayed is justice denied. The war on drugs has gathered momentum in the last decade. Prominent drug cartels have been busted and powerful drug lords are being put behind bars. But some countries have refused to join the effort. Countries like Pakistan, which have chosen to weaponize the illegal drug trade in the Indian subcontinent. More than 80% of illegal drugs that flow into India come from Pakistan, and the money from this business funds covert operations against India. Here's a report.
It is common knowledge that Pakistan pushes drugs across the Indian border, but the full extent of this illegal trade remained unknown until now. More than 80% of illegal drugs entering India come from Pakistan. The figure is based on a survey conducted by a European agency called EU Reporter. It reveals how Pakistan has an absolute monopoly in the subcontinent's narcotics trade. The second biggest supplier, Nepal, is at a distant 5%. While the figure is indeed startling, it shouldn't come as much of a surprise. Pakistan has long used narcotics trade to fund its terror operations. Authorities turn a blind eye to the illegal drug trade. If weapons and ammunition are also part of the consignment, Pakistan's deep state is an active proponent of this trade. The Inter-Services Intelligence is involved in pushing drugs into Punjab and Jammu and Kashmir. On multiple occasions, Indian officials have intercepted these shipments. One of the biggest drug busts was in June 2019, when customs officials intercepted a heroin consignment worth more than $350 million. It was headed for Kashmir. In July this year, the Border Security Force seized drugs worth $40 million near the international border. And it's not just India. Pakistani cartels are supplying to the entire region. In April this year, the Sri Lankan Navy intercepted contrabands worth $65 million. The country's biggest drug bust ever. 9 Pakistani nationals were arrested in the case. By conservative estimates, Pakistan's narcotics industry is worth more than $2 billion. The cartels that constitute this trade are mostly based out of the country's coastal cities. Their maritime shipments are almost never blocked by the Navy or the Coast Guard. It is widely believed that they have entered into strategic agreements with the Pakistani deep state. In 1994, former Pakistani Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif all but confirmed this link. He admitted that the ISI had proposed selling heroin to cover the country's military costs. Pakistan's drug cartels have no qualms about supplying domestically either. Around 8.9 million people in Pakistan are addicted to drugs. The country consumes close to 44 tons of heroin annually, most of which comes from across Afghanistan. Pakistan's narcotics trade is a two-pronged strategy. On the one hand, it attempts to get Indian youngsters hooked on illegal drugs, and on the other, it serves as a money minter for state-sponsored terrorism. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Now let's talk about protests. We've seen so many of them in the last few months. Protests against masks, protests against lockdown, protests against vaccines. The ones that are not even here yet. Protests against governments. The pandemic has not stopped people from flooding the roads, flouting social distancing norms, risking their lives and the lives of others, and creating utter chaos. We have questioned the timing of these protests many a time on this show. Many of you have written to us saying that protests are integral to a democracy and banning them would be interfering with people's freedom of expression. Fair point, and we are all for the freedom of expression. But there is a time and place for everything, and protests are no exception. Let me tell you what is making headlines in Israel today. The Israeli parliament has approved a law restricting protests during the Wuhan virus lockdown. It bans Israelis from holding demonstrations more than a kilometer from their homes. Critics are calling it anti-democratic. What about the health crisis that these protests pose? Are they discounting it? And about the move being quote-unquote anti-democratic, I want to make a little case tonight, and this is not in favor of Israel or the government of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. It is in favor of democracy and the right to life. You see, Israel is one of the most resilient democracies of our times. It has its checks and balances in place. It's a country where the sitting Prime Minister faces 3 cases, where people are not shy of lining up outside polling booths and exercising their franchise, even if they have to do it thrice in 1 year. The country has a free press. Israel's democracy cannot be bought with a carrot. It is a country where people are free to protest against their leader, even when he's scoring foreign policy goals and very big ones, even when he's normalizing ties with the Arab world, delivering on his promises. What does all of this tell us? Israel's democratic institutions are very strong. The Knesset knows this only too well. While Israeli lawmakers respect the voters' freedom of expression, they also need to legislate to safeguard people's right to life. Because our freedom of expression cannot be an excuse to put lives at risk and deny people their most fundamental right, the right to life. So I'll end with this. It needs a strong democracy to legislate according to the need of the hour. Think about this. I'll leave you with that thought. And Gravitas Images, as always, thank you for watching.
Siapa